Hello everybody, Dokkan Assets here. Today we are back with another animation analysis video. And I'm sure that a lot of you have been waiting for this video and of course the video that will follow it. Of course, today we're going to be taking a look at the brand new Worldwide Celebration STR Final Form Cooler animations, and later on today, probably like an hour after this video goes up, Goku's animations will be here for you to enjoy me analyzing them. So we're going to hop into Cooler's animations here. Of course, as per usual, we'll watch through these in the regular speed one time through, and as per usual, we use the JP ones because for some reason Global likes to cut off a little bit of the sides of the animation, so we get to see more of the full box, right, or the full screen, I guess. So let's go ahead and take a look at these. I have been very excited to talk about these because I have been so busy. I've streamed like 3 times this weekend. Obviously, all of the different Global and JP data downloads I've been doing, and finally, I get to sit down and do what I love, which is making these videos. So people have already been kind of asking me my opinion on these and asking me if I was going to do a video on these, and of course, how could I not, with these being the brand new, excuse me, big boy units. I combined a new and big boy there, I think is what was happening in my brain. But these animations, right, they're in a very interesting spot for me. I've heard a lot of people say that they are kind of just okay. They're not bad by any means, right? Like, you look at this and you're not like, ooh, that's kind of yucky. Especially this one. I think the active skill for Cooler is easily his best animation. I think that there's probably no question about that one. But I have to say, I think overall for Cooler, obviously we're going to get into his animations overall. I think from just a overall perspective, and this is so weird to say, they're kind of boring. Like, is that weird for me to say? Maybe that is more akin to the source material itself rather than the animations, because of course that does play a huge part in this. But knowing that's my thoughts, let's go ahead and jump in and see what we think here. So of course, we have Cooler's intro animation, which, by the way, already, when I watched this for the first time, there was something I was so disappointed to see. And I know that it may not seem like a big deal. It may seem just like a nitpick. But, oh baby, the fact that they jumped from Cooler's hands going here to here in a matter of a frame, the same thing with his other hand, I was like, there is no way that these are the Worldwide Celebration units. That just can't be. Because the Worldwide Celebration units are supposed to be the characters that have the utmost quality. There is virtually not a single thing wrong with them, right? They're like, them and the anniversary characters are the characters that you expect to be the top tier animations in the game, right? And when I saw that, and granted, I know it's not a big deal, and you may not have even noticed it the first time that you watched it through, but the fact that there is such an awkward jump, and at least for me, literally my first watch through, I noticed that. Like, I know that sometimes when it comes to these weird looking things in Dokkan animations, it takes me a couple of watches to kind of see, you know, what I'm looking for, and, you know, obviously to sort of pick it apart. But that was watch 1, bro. Frame 1. Very unfortunate to see. So obviously after that, though, we move into a actually very good change in position here, which of course is Cooler throwing his arms to the side here. I kind of do wish there was a little bit more frames in between for that, but that's definitely more of a nitpick. It's a lot less problematic than the posing literally in the beginning, right? This is fine. And I think that as well, the motion lines on Cooler here too definitely help emphasize the movement, which is really cool. They definitely did a very good job with that. Looks pretty good if I do say so myself. Of course, I am really glad that they included this animation because I know a lot of people really wanted this to be a part of it. The rock explosion here looks really, really good. Of course, we have Cooler standing proud, or more like flying proud, I guess, before he lifts his arm up with a perfect movement. In contrast to the very stinky, you know, sudden changes with the intro animation there, this animation is clean as a whistle. It is the perfect amount of movement, the perfect parts that should be snappy, right? And all of it put together by a very nice addition of the motion lines to sort of emphasize that as well. Some very cool perspective on the hand, right? Because obviously you see this originally and Cooler's hand seems kind of far away, and then obviously as he lifts his hand up, right, you can see that the hand seems to be a lot more closer to the camera, and they do a good job of tilting his head slightly to make it look like he's now moving towards the camera. Very good stuff for that. Of course, we have more rocks flying everywhere, which look fine. I will say they do look a little bit simple. Okay, maybe in the second part they don't look as simple, but I will say with these, like these right here, and then of course the first section of them, which was right after the first lift up, the rocks look very basic. They look like they're almost incomplete, like they don't have enough shading or detail to them. I did just rewatch the movie before the celebration began, and I swear they looked a little bit more detailed than just some brown blocks floating up into the sky. Nonetheless, though, obviously that's the part that people care a lot less about. People like Cooler more. Now, okay, we need to talk about this part. So, this part really gets me. First of all, this looks very, very goofy in the slowed down speed. So we're going to look at this in actual full-time speed. For the end of this animation, they have Cooler laughing here. And this has got to be one of the most awkward Dokkan animations that I think I've seen in a long time. I don't use that word too often, I feel like, to describe something, because usually I feel like there's better descriptors, but I think that is the perfect descriptor for how this looks. It looks awkward. This looks like this is a very strange comparison to make, but the boy Crackalack on my live stream when we were looking at the animations, he said that Cooler looks like a G1 Transformer in the way that he's moving, and I very much so agree in the way of, like, it almost feels like early janky animation, right? I understand that I guess he would maybe move like this because, of course, there's no mouth to emphasize this. And, of course, you know, the way that this is shot, you're only seeing basically the headshot of him. But this looks like he's, like, headbanging rather than laughing. I don't know. Maybe they should have put a couple more frames in between there to make it feel a little bit more natural. But it's just... it's not it. If I'm being 100% honest with you. It's very awkward to me. 100%. Okay, so we move on to the 12 key now. I have to say, this part right here, this little introduction animation, easily one of my favorite sections of his animation. Again, like I said, the acting skill is definitely my favorite. But this section right here is super neat. So we have a lot of very nice small minimal movement on Cooler, even though he's very far away. Obviously, you can see that his arms move a little bit, the tail moves, even his legs move a little bit, right? And he gets into that position when, this is of course when he's just jumping off the waterfall at Goku, but instead they do it in the sky for this animation, which is a nice little reference to that scene for sure. But yeah, all of the minimal movement looks so good, and I gotta say, the way Cooler is shaded here, he looks like he's 3D. This is a very, very good job on the shading on the dev's part to make it look like this, because this literally looks like a 3D model, right? It looks very, very clean. We have the fade out where, of course, he's moving super quickly, which that looks super, super nice. They cut away to this section, which ironically enough is sort of looking above the waterfall. But we have Cooler come into frame here. And I gotta say, this shot right here is pretty cool because... listen, that pun is gonna happen. I'm sorry. It's not intentional, I swear. Oh man, why did he have to be named Cooler? Anyway, we have Cooler come in with the knee here, with the white flash. I gotta say, the shading on this is really, really sick, and I do see this shading throughout the Cooler movie. But the thing that's so strange about this shot to me is, like, is his knee emanating light? Is ki coming out of his knee? Is that why they did the shading? Did they just do it to sort of emphasize that? Because clearly you can see a frame later, right, it goes into his regular color scheme. So it's kind of strange to me that they had him change colors for a moment, because even when he comes in, he's his normal color scheme, right? I don't know, it just seemed a little bit weird to me, but I think that section looks alright, and very cool. You actually have a little bit of minimal movement. It's really hard to tell in his body, considering that, you know, it moves so quickly across the screen, but you can tell that his tail actually does wiggle a little bit, which is a really nice detail as he's flying by. So we of course have Goku being hit by Cooler's knee here. This is definitely a little bit more of an L on the sprites, I think, because Cooler looks very nice. He looks very well shaded. Again, he has a little bit more of that 3D-esque look. They have these really cool, you know, anime background, super moving fast, right, motion lines, right, you know, in anime sometimes in the fight scenes. I feel like I've talked about this a lot lately in animation analysis videos, but I guess it's because Dokkan's been including it a lot lately in animations. But they have these like super speed lines with like a lot of colors in the background, right? And that's what they're doing for this shot. But the sprite looks so out of place because it is not even close to the same kind of shading, or even really, I don't want to say artistic style, because of course it's just sort of the Dragon Ball Z style. But it doesn't feel like it's the same art style, and it of course doesn't help that it's super low quality. Gotta love the sprites of Dokkan, but I don't think this section looks too bad. I honestly think that it just looks a little bit awkward because of the sprite, and there's not really like a good animation to compare with it. I almost kind of wish they would have had Goku on the other side, like covering his knee, because then I feel like it would have been a little bit more natural. Good detail here though, by the way, you do have his tail moving in the background, which is really cool. Even though there is no movement on the hands or the feet here, I feel like it's not as big of a deal, and it's cool that they actually animated the tail as well. This is also a super sick transition, I will say. I did not even notice this actually the first time I watched this animation. They have this whole thing where, you know, Cooler's zooming forward with Goku, and they transition this shot with, by the way, you know, cool that they sort of distract your eyes with the cut-in, sort of zooming in before they have Goku and Cooler against the rock. That is a great way to sort of avert your attention. Again, I think that there's something like that in like advertising or animation where it's like you don't notice a blunder, or not even really like a blunder, but something that they're trying to like cover up because your attention's just elsewhere. This is a very good job of that, and we obviously have the blue background still present, and what's cool is the white flash then transitions back into reality, quote unquote, like, you know, what's actually happening in the background and not that sort of anime-esque thing, which I think is a really neat transition. I actually really like that a lot. Definitely very, very cool for that. So we have Cooler holding Goku against the wall here. Obviously the screen shakes to sort of emphasize the impact, which I think that is pretty good, honestly. Funny enough, if you can see here, the sprite actually shakes a little bit. I know it's a little bit hard to tell. There we go. Wow, wow. Oh. My man's doing a little jig there. But yeah, a little bit of movement on Cooler too. You can see obviously his tail is moving. The rocks, I gotta say, look really, really nice in this section too. They are a lot more closer up to Goku as they make impact before they actually sort of spread out around everywhere. I think that is pretty neat. Then of course we have Cooler raise his hands and hit Goku down. Very, very nice impact frame, by the way, here. Not only do we have the white, but this really cool yellow impact frame, which is super sick. Again, I really, really like this, but I think it's just the fact that Goku feels so out of place here because, of course, you know, it's the sprite and they can't change the color of the sprite like that to match the scene. Sorry, I had to take a quick drink of water. Hydrate or dihydrate, baby, which is what Goku's going to do right now as he hits the water below. I do really like the little water effect that they have. It's not much, but it definitely works for what it is. Let's take a look at Cooler's movement here, because I swear I noticed something funny. So Cooler moves very quickly here, but I guess that kind of makes sense. He is pretty small on the screen. We have a lot of changing positions. This is pretty drastic, though. This going from sort of tilting his head around to then looking immediately down and forward, essentially, right? Definitely a very drastic change. This movement right here, I think, is a lot better because it's very minimal, and if they would have had more frames like that as he spun around, I feel like the animation would have been a little bit more fluid. Let's actually take a look at that in the full-time speed, because I'm curious to see how that actually looks. Let me see. Boom. Okay. So not too bad in the full-time speed for sure. But it is still definitely a little bit like, you know, he feels like he's a little bit janky when he turns around. At least that's what I feel like. I feel like there's a little bit of missing movement in there. Okay. So now we have Cooler fly down, which I actually do really like this shot a lot. I think this is pretty cool. And there's some very nice, very small movement. It's very hard to see. But up here, right, when Cooler is actually getting into position, right, that looks super nice and fluid, right, as he actually stances up to fly down, right. It looks really, really good. And it leads perfectly into this larger asset here. With Cooler flying forward, which looks good too. You obviously have the ground sort of being blurred from the speed, which is cool too. And a transition into the card art, which I was like, wow, that's actually quite a bit of animation before the card art, right? We had the scene where Cooler knees him into the rock, and then of course turns down and then flies down. Quite a bit before the card art appears. So this section is actually really, really sick, right? We have the shot of the water, which obviously you can see Goku has sort of drowned in the water. And then we have Cooler fly in, which this kind of looks funny out of context, I'm not going to lie, bro. I'd give that man a 10 for his dive. He killed it, bro. But yeah, obviously Cooler hits the water, and this looks super nice. A very cool shot. It's just there for a moment, right, of Cooler breaking through the surface of the water, and you can see above the water and under the water. I think that is super sick. We obviously have these sort of bubbles fly off of Cooler here, and some crazy speed obviously coming off of Cooler with the water flowing around him. I think this is a great way to emphasize that. And this shot is so cool. Highly underrated in my opinion, with Cooler here zooming through the water. This shot looks really, really nice. I think they executed this section very, very well. So this is also super cool. Look at this water effect here. It's a little bit weird that it starts off already sort of spouting up rather than just being flat, because I feel like it would have been a little bit more cool, if the water would have been still and then it suddenly explodes, right? But nonetheless, you have this really cool spiral here, and then the water explodes outward, which I think that effect, again, works really well and looks very, very nice. So yeah, then of course we have this shot of Cooler holding Goku down here, which I will say, I do think this looks a little bit awkward. However, again, like I said, I did just recently rewatch the Cooler movie before the celebration began, and I can tell you that this is literally how the scene went down. Cooler is just holding his fist against Goku in the hole that you're about to see here, right, literally right there, which I think the water effects look great. They absolutely nailed that for sure. You have Cooler fly out and look down at Goku here as the water begins to settle, and that actually is a KO screen, which is pretty cool there. So yeah, definitely nothing crazy on the end here. Again, I think this is more so the animation of the actual movie that's the reason why this looks kind of awkward, but this is accurate to how it is, right? Again, the one thing I can say here is that this isn't Cooler's problem. Goku definitely feels very out of place in this shot because Cooler himself looks very high quality in the asset department. And obviously the background and the little bit of water there, which you can see, they even bothered to animate the water flowing here. And fish! I didn't even notice that. There's a little fish flop in there. That's awesome. Yeah, obviously this looks all very high quality, but then you have Goku there who's like and ruins the frame. It's kind of interesting that they pan out immediately with just one cut from one shot to another. And the ground seems to be a lot darker here than the sort of lighter brown that ends up being present at the end there, which is kind of interesting that they decided to do it that way. Okay, so moving on from that animation, we have the 18 key. And we have Cooler fly forward here. First of all, why is his tail so short there? His tail is never that short, my guy. That is very, very interesting that it looks like that. I think that's just a matter of perspective, though. Okay, so I will say, too, this shot is actually really sick. I'm not going to lie. This is a very cool shot. I like this shot a lot with Goku standing in the distance. It looks really, really good. Okay, so we obviously have Cooler get stanced up, before flying forward. How does this look in full motion? I want to see. So we have Cooler then fly forward with the rocks sort of break around him. Funny enough, this actually is a good way to sort of emphasize my point from before. Look how detailed these rocks are, right? Remember in the intro animation I was talking about how the rocks in this looked very bare, right? All things considered. And then you have animations like this where the rocks are super detailed. So strange to me that they decided to make those so basic. Okay, so let's see. How does this look in full? Yeah, that's all right. He does kind of pause for a little bit too long for my liking. He goes, whoop, bop. I don't know. Very interesting that he stays there for just a moment. But definitely not too bad. I think the perspective is a little bit wonky, but I mean, that's just because of the perspective. Now, I will say, this is such a weird thing for me, right? So this shot right here is supposed to be when Cooler is flying through the Kamehameha that Goku is shooting, right? Remember in the Cooler movie, he's literally ripping through the middle of it at breakneck pace, right? Which Cooler himself looks good, and again, the tail animation is very nice. We also have, ironically enough, a blue background, which maybe that was a reference to the Kamehameha that he's supposed to be flying through. But, you know, just sort of your anime speed scene. And then we have Cooler fly up onto the... Okay, I'm not going to nitpick that because obviously this is meant to be the beginning stance up for, you know, you're not even going to see this for a moment. You're basically going to blink and miss it. But he does look like he's doing the nya-nya type of thing. Very funny there. We have Cooler come up and immediately punch Goku in the face. Here's the thing, right? This whole scene, this sequence, is supposed to be when Cooler flies through the Kamehameha and then jumps out the top of it, right? Basically, like, peeking his torso out, and then socks Goku in the jaw, right? It is just unfortunate that this animation is kind of hindered and seems a little bit less interesting considering what the source material was, because obviously that scene is one of the most iconic scenes in the Cooler movie. It's one part that people really remember the most, and obviously, like, Cooler's so raw in that scene, right? And not that this is a bad animation by any means. I think that really everything here looks fine. The movement looks all right, right? Nice and clean. Nice follow through on the punch as well. You even have that little bit of spit coming out from Goku, I guess, maybe just like the air moving quickly. But I feel like this scene is just taken down a little bit just because of the fact that you don't have that included. And of course, the problem with that is, like, how would you even go about including that? Because of course not every enemy that you're fighting, can fire a beam like that, nor will they be using that in their super attack, so on and so forth, right? So they could have used it for a counter animation too, and that maybe would have been one way to solve the problem, because then maybe they would have felt more inclined to, like, include the key anyway, even if a character had, like, a punching super or something like that. You know, and I am kind of disappointed, I will admit, that this animation is not a counter. I'm glad that it was included because I feel like it wouldn't be a complete representation of Cooler without it, right? Because this is probably like the end-all be-all Cooler for Dokkan. Like, there's not really anything else really that they can take from his animations. At least I think so. The movie's not even really that long. It's like 45 minutes. Maybe if they do base form Cooler, or I guess it would be technically fifth form Cooler. But regardless, I just wanted to throw that in here about this part because it's something that I really wanted to say, especially when I saw this for the first time and I was like, dang, that looks sick, but it would be so much cooler. I hate these puns. If the Kamehameha was there, right? Alright, so either way, moving on, right? We have Goku fly forward a little bit, which, by the way, very, very nice background here. I gotta give props to that. It looks super clean. We have Cooler coming out of nowhere, and this shot is actually very, very well done, I gotta say. Cooler comes in super quickly. Very nice speed lines on the boy to sort of emphasize how quickly he's coming in. A very nice impact effect there. The white frame to sort of emphasize it, and a tiny bit of rotoscoping there a little bit, just a little bit. If you're unfamiliar, rotoscoping is basically the technique that they use to make 2D images feel 3D, and that is absolutely what is happening here, right? Cooler feels like he's actually twisting around, right? Like it's a 3D image, right? Which is really, really cool. I'm not going to be able to stop, am I? But it looks really good. The rotoscoping there is very, very nice, and I think that they nail it. Now, we do have a very quick cut to the next scene, quote-unquote, or the next section here. I will say, one thing that is a little bit janky about that, and I do want to watch that in full-time speed, is I feel like the shading is a lot more basic on this asset than it is here. Maybe it's just because I watched the whole thing turn and it feels like it's more like a 3D model. But this feels a lot more like an asset in a video game to me. Especially with just the more basic look of it compared to this, which it's not that much of a difference, I will admit, but it is still there to me when I look at that. So yeah, we have Cooler come up. Okay, so that's good, right? Again, this is why I like to take a look at these animations slow, but then I also like to make sure that I take a look at them fast, because normally if I was just looking at that in slow motion, I'd be like, yeah, that's really awkward. But obviously, the point of this animation is for it to be a quick punch, right? He comes in, bam, bam, right? And knocks him down, right? So of course, you know, in the full-time speed, it's going to look fun. Okay, and speaking of which, the actual punch itself is good. I really like the follow-through that Cooler does as well. Let me go back a little bit here. There we go. The follow-through that Cooler has on the actual punch, right, is very, very nice. And it's cool, too, that they mask his position change with a white frame there that is sort of like the impact frame. That is definitely a very, very good way to transition between poses rather than just doing it kind of janky, right? Okay, so then we have Goku fly into the rocks here. Again, unfortunately, the sprite doesn't perfectly fit, but that's just because Dokkan sprites will be Dokkan sprites, right? Alright, so then we have the kick. And this is one part that I really, really wanted to talk about with this animation. So we have Cooler come through, right, and immediately kick Goku. Now, here's the thing with this animation for me. I don't think it looks bad. I really wish it was zoomed in a little bit more. I feel like it's way too far away, right? Cooler looks really small, especially in the beginning here, right? This impact frame is fire, though, I have to say. But Cooler looks pretty small. I feel like the kick doesn't have a lot of impact, which is really a shame because when you watch the movie, you're literally like feeling a pain in your chest from how hard Goku got hit, right? Like when I watched this for the first time, I saw the kick and I was like, that's it? I don't know. I know there is a little bit of like recoil on Cooler's part, which is good, and they do a little bit of a screen shake, right? But it just doesn't feel that impactful for me, right? I think the screen shake is what they try and do to sort of give you that feeling of impactfulness, but I feel like it's not executed very well. Unfortunately, and this is what I hate when I critique something and I don't really have a solution for it when it comes to these animations, I don't really know what they would have done to make it more impactful. Maybe more white frames, again, maybe a better angle, maybe a little bit more recoil on Cooler. But overall, right, I don't know. To me, it feels a little bit disappointing. And also the other thing I wanted to mention here, too, is, first of all, Cooler's hands are kind of weird here. I've looked at this scene a couple times, and I don't think that this arm is bent like this. I could just be misremembering for sure. But it does look a little bit weird. I will say, when he pulls his foot up too, ooh, that's a little yucky, because the weird thing about this animation, right, and it looks a little bit more correct here, is that Cooler's foot is supposed to be flat against Goku's chest right here, right? But then he lifts up his foot, and it almost looks like that he was hitting him with his ankle, right? Because you see the flat part of his foot comes up in front of Goku, or more like to the side of Goku. So it makes this animation also kind of not really feel like it's the way that it's supposed to be, right? Regardless, though, we do have the second kick, which this part looks good. The only thing that really kind of stinks about this shot right here is that, you know, it's animated fine and it looks good. The rock effects are very nice, too. But, man, Goku is not that small. Like, he looks somewhat correct in this shot, right? Cooler's a big dude, so of course he towers over Goku. And even in the shot that follows, right, where he's sort of looking at him in the wall here, this looks a little bit more size accurate, but my man looks like a Smurf compared to a human being in the shot. This might also just be because of the sprites once again, but I feel like they could have either made Cooler's foot smaller or something like that. This is definitely a little bit awkward when you look at it this way, right? This shot is pretty cool, I do have to say, where we have Cooler sort of looking down on Goku stuck in the wall. I really, really like this shot. It is a very, very nice one, executed very well. We have Cooler take a quick step back, which I'm trying to get as close to those frames as I can there. There we go. This execution of Cooler moving backward actually looks fantastic in my opinion. I think they actually nailed that perfectly. Look how long his legs look in that shot, but that makes sense because they're stretching him a little bit to give you that sort of effect. So we move to the card art now. And this section, I will say, man, this actually looks really good. They nailed it with the key effects for this. So we have Cooler throw his hand forward, and this very nice spark, first of all. Again, superb lighting effects here, if I do say so myself. Nailed it on the lighting effects 100%. We have this little explosion outward here with these very nice little pew 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 of the little key. A white light to sort of emphasize it, right? The impact frame there. And look at the key surrounding Cooler's hand. It looks so good, dude. This shot I was very impressed with when I saw this, when I was watching the animations earlier. I think that this shot is super cool. It's so quick, which is kind of a shame, but it looks great. It looks super good. So then we have a little bit of a zoom out of that where we have this very interesting sort of, it almost looks like a figure effect piece as the light sort of grows because of course the key blasts him, right? And overall, I think this section also looks really good. The key looks fantastic. You can see there's a little bit of key emanating out of Cooler's hands as well. The shadows look really good here. The lighting effect on Cooler looks fantastic. And they do this really cool thing here too, which funny enough, this was in Frieza and Goku's essay from last year's Worldwide because we just took a look at them the other day. Where they sort of have the assets cut up a little bit to make it look like the sprite is getting engulfed in their super. That is really, really cool and very well executed for sure. All right, it's finally time, ladies and gentlemen. Let me take a sip of water. It's time, ladies and gentlemen. The active skill. So, first of all, before we get into the actual chunky bits, this part looks very, very funny. I think it's just the angle, to be honest with you. But this shot does look very goofy. This is another one of those things where it is a little bit of a shame that they fade in so quickly, because I would have loved to see this in a little bit more higher color and higher quality, right? Because obviously, you know, it fades in like that, right? But this looks pretty good. I will say, besides the angle being a little bit weird, the only problem I really have with this is the whole thing doesn't have a ton of movement. I mean, Cooler does move his tail throughout this animation, which is good to give it a little bit more lifelike movement. But I kind of feel like, I don't know, there should have been, like, his feet were maybe flowing a little bit in the wind, or his arms were maybe moving a little bit. This really feels like PNG scrolling up, which I thought that we were past with Dokkan, right? I thought that we've been past that era of Dokkan for a long time where it's just a PNG sliding forward, and don't you worry, in Goku's video there will be an example of that. But it is a little bit of a shame to see here for Cooler. But we have him go up into the sky, and this is where things get good, ladies and gentlemen. Oh man, strap yourselves in, buckle in if you're watching this video in a car. Don't drive and watch the video, by the way. This shot right here is so good. So we have a very cool zoom in of Cooler, and before we even get to the supernova, let's take a look at this section once again. Oh my gosh, this is so cool. So we have Cooler sort of twist around a little bit and get closer to the camera, right? Which is a very nice angle here. I definitely like this little bit of perspective. Very neat, very unique. Makes this animation feel a lot more dynamic for sure. And then we have Cooler back up and a super cool perspective where you have the hand so close to the screen and Cooler feels a lot more farther away. Really, really like the way that this is done. I love the perspective on this. This kind of looks... Yo, we about to throw down. Very funny looking shot if I do say so myself. But I really like that perspective. And then obviously you have Cooler bring his hand up, right? And he actually brings it back too, which is nice, right? It goes from kind of limp forward, right? To then just being loose and open, and then directly behind him with the key forming in his hand. Very well executed shot. The only thing that I could probably say about it is Cooler does look a little bit weird, but that's because of the zoom and the way that they're sort of giving you the perspective on him here, right? Regardless, though, I think this shot looks really good overall. And then, oh man, we go into peak, ladies and gentlemen. We go into peak. Look at this. So we have the supernova form behind Cooler. The sky begins to get dark. And we, of course, have Cooler get into his proper position here with a little bit of bootleg rotoscoping. And look at the lighting effects that come down on him and the little shadows. Oh my gosh. The first time I saw this, whoops, I did not mean to scroll down. Bury the Light is a banger, by the way. But, holy cow, dude. The shading on this is so good. It's so good. I love the color scheme. The actual supernova itself looks like an actual sun, right? The little shadows that they have coming off of Cooler look very, very nice. And of course, after this shot, we get the big kahuna shot, which is a cut to it zoomed in. Oh my gosh, this looks so good, dude. This shot is easily the best in the animation. It looks really nice. It almost gives you that sort of 3D effect. It kind of reminds me of this one specific type of art that there is like Dragon Ball merch for it. It's like the metal sheets. I know probably no one will get that reference, but it looks like that art style with the way that it's shaded, which is really cool, right? It looks very, very nice indeed. I definitely love the way that this looks. And oh my gosh, dude. Oh, look at this. That shot is so mint, first of all. This is kind of funny, too, because even though he has the mask on here, it almost looks like he's scowling a little bit. By the way, again, great perspective with Cooler's hand being so close to the camera here. And then, of course, we zoom in to Cooler before we have this shot of him very close up to the camera. This shot looks really good, too, where we finally zoom out and he throws the supernova. I really, really like, too, the colors in the background. I think even though you would think that they would be more of those darker colors that you saw in the beginning, I think when you're so close to it, maybe it wouldn't look like that with the sort of optical illusion to your eyes, which is really cool. But Cooler still has the light on him, and the actual movement itself of throwing it looks fantastic. Not only that, but they also give you another really nice, unique angle, right? With the sort of hand flying by the screen, right? And you can see the very quick sort of speed lines that they use to represent that. Very, very nice. You go to Cooler's shoulder, and then you have him throwing the ball forward. Looks great. Absolutely no complaints from me on that section. I think that they couldn't have done it better any other way. One thing that is really cool to note actually here, I didn't even notice this. The edge of the sun sort of like warps the world, which makes sense because obviously heat waves sort of warp things a little bit. That's a really cool attention to detail. With a very nice looking supernova, it literally looks perfect. I don't think that they could have got that any better. From the back here, you do have Cooler move a little bit, which is cool. It looks very, very clean in that little shot there. You have the enemy sprite obviously taking the hit and going down. The rocks flying look good. The smoke effects look very, very nice as well. And you have these sort of steam erupting from the planet here because, of course, you know, it's sort of beginning to make contact with the Earth, right? Very, very nice shot here, not only with it increasing in size, but also the lighting effects actually sort of reflecting off of Cooler, right? You can see that the light is sort of shimmering off of him. He does have a quick position change there, which was kind of interesting. But yeah, the lighting effects on him look good. The lighting effects on the planet look really good. The rocks look nice. Again, lots of great perspectives with this. We even have this little rock here sort of fly by the camera. Very, very cool perspective for sure. And it finally hits the ground. And what's interesting is that you don't really see any kind of explosion with this, which actually really makes sense, which is kind of funny because you would think, wait, why is there no boom? But in the actual movie, of course, this is the scene where Goku would then push the supernova back and then, you know, Cooler would fly in the sun. But of course, since there's no real explosion, I guess they could have, winged it and made one where it sort of just blows up the planet. But I think it's kind of cool because it's sort of like Cooler still doesn't win in a weird sort of way. Even though the, energy ball is probably going to blow up the planet. He still just kind of has it hanging there, right? Because we obviously fade out for a moment after it's just sitting against the ground. And we have this KO screen, which actually looks pretty cool. I will say Cooler's face looks a little bit too round here. It almost looks like someone's like specific art style of drawing Cooler rather than actually Cooler. I feel like it's not this round. In fact, his whole body looks very round here, which I mean, he kind of is, but it looks like too round almost. So we have him laughing here, which I really, again, love the lighting effects that they did. Obviously, this is supposed to be like the supernova lighting reflecting off of him. And the look down is a perfect touch, honestly, to obviously have this sort of pause on the KO screen. I really, really like that little look, too. When he looks down, funny enough, I feel like he almost looks a little bit more correct than he did with the first head position there. So, that is everything for Cooler. Final thoughts on this bad boy. So, this is an interesting one for me. Even though there is a lot of really cool stuff in these animations, there is no denying that, right? There's some very nice transitions, some very nice angles throughout this whole thing. There are a lot of parts of this that are awkward, and there are a lot of parts of this that sort of feel a little bit inaccurate, I guess you would say. There are a lot of parts of this that also feel very static, where I feel like there's not enough movement to make it sort of interesting. That's kind of why in the beginning I, gave my take that they're kind of a little bit boring, which is so weird because, of course, there is like a ton of action-packed stuff going on in this animation, but it just, some of it doesn't feel like it has a lot of impact, and I think that even though there is some great stuff in here, overall, they just kind of feel a little bit lackluster to me. They just don't really feel that special. The active skill feels real good. The active skill, they nailed it. I think that that one is easily his best animation. I don't think anybody would really even contest that, to be honest with you. But, I don't know. This animation just kind of feels me wanting more. I think that's a good way to describe my final feelings. I want more from these animations, right? I want them to do a little bit more, maybe get a little bit more creative with it, and take out all the stuff that's awkward. Like the laughing and the kick feeling like it's not really that impactful. All those little things that I was sort of talking about, I feel like would tie this animation a lot more. Because there is some really cool stuff in here. Cooler going through the water is super sick. Obviously, him flying up towards the sky for this section, funny enough, where he would be going through the Kamehameha is really cool. The choreography is very, very nice for Cooler, right? I think they nailed his, personality very, very well for this. But it just leaves me wanting more. So, let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. As always, I would love to hear what you guys have to think about these guys. I definitely don't think that these animations are bad by any means. There are a couple of moments where they're not animated the best, but they're definitely not animated poorly. They're certainly better than a lot of other units that we've gotten this year alone. But I definitely don't think that they're the best. And I think they're just going to end up being lower on the totem pole in terms of their animations overall, especially as the year continues. So we'll have to see where they end up. These guys might end up on the top 5 worst of the year, that video that I do every year. So we'll see if that ends up happening. That would be interesting. These would definitely categorize more for me, though. Again, rather in not necessarily the bad, but the boring or lackluster, like I've been saying the whole time. I want to emphasize that. Thank you guys so much for watching once again. Of course, if you enjoyed, like and subscribe. Thank you guys so much for all your support on these. These videos have been doing crazy good lately, which I really appreciate because I actually really like making these. It's like my favorite Dokkan thing to make. So thank you guys so much for your support. Really, really appreciate it. Dokkan Assets out. Peace.